Good evening. Welcome to the Crown Hill Journey. I'm Christina Apt, and I am your guide for this journey, and I'm also the author of the book, Crown Hill, a novel of love, life, and the afterlife. So it is Wednesday evening, hump day, as some people like to call it. I'm having a long week. I don't know about anyone else, but it's been a long and tough week for me so far. So I am very grateful to be able to come here tonight to this world of Crown Hill and have some peace reading about someone else's life, reading about the drama in someone else's life instead of trying to deal with the drama in my life. So there are a few things that when you read a book yourself, you have the ability to turn the pages back and forth when something strikes you, when you're not sure about a name, when you want to know more about a character to go back and verify who they are. You can go back and forth through the book. When we read like this, where I have the book and you have the ears, you don't have that ability. So each night when we read again, I try to remind you of the things that you might need to remember because I know what's coming, right? So here are the things that I would like to tell you to remember tonight as we go into chapter 11. The first thing is Meg over the weekend dealt with what she thought was a rabid animal in her shed and ended up being a feral cat with 5 baby kittens. Because she didn't know that that's the simplicity of that reality, she was afraid that it was a rabid animal and might hurt Goldie. So she called 911, the town police. The dispatcher was dismissive, clearly dismissive, but sent the animal control officer, who ended up being Brady Callahan, who she met in the Super Sure? I'm not sure it's called Sure Fine for real in the town. I don't think I use the same name, but in the supermarket parking lot where he had a bag of stewed tomatoes that broke open and the cans rolled across the driveway, and she slipped and fell on one. So that was how Brady and Meg met. But when he came to her farm to Crown Hill to answer the call, the 911 call, he was respectful and supportive and gave Meg all the credit in the world for her reaction to a feral cat. So those are the things that are really important to remember in that part of the story. It's also important to remember that Meg went to work for Jake Kelly, last week at the construction company in town. And Jake is crusty on the outside, but a big marshmallow on the inside. And the only other thing I want to remind you of is that when Crown Hill and Mary speak about Meg and her powers, her ability to possibly help Mary pass to the next world, Mary often brings up Rose. And if you're not familiar with Rose, Rose is from the very beginning of the book. She's a young girl who came in 1922 when Edward Randall owned the house as his summer home. And she was the daughter of the governess that lived next door to Crown Hill. And Rose was a pure, innocent child of great heart. And she was someone who could have helped Mary pass, but it was not meant to be. But Mary continually refers to Rose now when she's talking to Crown Hill about Meg, that she was, it's been since Rose, since someone was in this house with the ability and the purity and the intent to be able to help me pass. But the important part to remember, Rose liked to be called by Rose, but that was not her name. Rose was her middle name. Her real name was Margaret Rose. And with that, let us begin. Sip of wine. Glasses. Crown Hill, a novel of love, life, and the afterlife. Book 3, Meg, Chapter 11. How could she have overslept? Meg was sure she set the alarm for 5:45 a.m. before she drifted off to sleep. Yet here it was, 6:30, no alarm, and she was just waking up. Monday morning of her second work week, and she had less than 20 minutes to get showered, dressed, take care of Goldie, grab some tea, and head out the door. Ugh. Meg hated having to rush first thing in the morning. She hated being late even more. Somehow, she would find a way to get to work on time. With 2 minutes to spare, Meg drove into the Kelly and Sons parking lot, pulling up next to her boss's tried and true pickup. There was as much rust and dirt on the old truck as there was metal. but Jake loved his old warrior, as he called the aging vehicle. Truthfully, after seeing the way he abused the truck, Meg thought it a true testament to its durability that it continued to run at all. Heading to the door, Meg could hear the now familiar refrain of Jake's Morning Glory serenade. She was getting used to his off-key delivery and understood that singing got Jake's morning off to a really good start. According to her boss, the song was one he learned while spending time with his maiden aunts from his mother's side of the family. Whenever he would stay overnight at their house, one of the aunts would come upstairs and waken him with Morning Glory and a fresh-baked muffin treat. Jake came to love the song, to the point that he started singing the ditty at home every morning. He didn't care that his father termed it a sissy girl song. He liked the way it made him feel as he belted it out, crooner style. Over the years, Jake continued his morning song fest, eventually bringing the musical tradition to work, mostly as a means of annoying his father. Meg wasn't sure she would have enjoyed being around the business during those family years. Dealing with one Kelly at a time was more than enough of a challenge. Her assumption was confirmed as she walked through the door. "Well, nice of you to show up, Miss Flynn." Jake enjoyed teasing Meg, and she understood that it was his way of showing affection. Excuse me. However, with the hurried nature of her morning, Meg was not exactly in the mood. "Morning, Jake, and it's 6:59. I am officially 1 minute early, but I won't charge you any overtime this week." Meg realized that the best way to deal with Jake was to give exactly what he gave. Sassing back was her term her mother used to describe it. It was a lesson Meg had learned long ago in high school when the boys would pick on her. It was also a lesson she learned to forget with Cal, who punished Meg any time she had the nerve to be sassy. "Oh, what's the matter, Meggie girl? Get up on the wrong side of the bed this morning?" In the name of peace and quiet, Meg chose to ignore Jake as she headed to her desk of stacked paperwork. The silence that followed gave her hope that Jake would settle down and allow her time to fully wake up and become functional. "Or maybe you're still recovering from that crazy wild animal attack yesterday, huh, Meggie?" Meg sat stunned, trying to decide if she had somehow misheard Jake or if she was still in the early morning stupor. How could he know? She couldn't imagine that Brady had told her boss. They weren't even friends as far as she was aware, and no one else was around her farm yesterday. No one else could have knowledge of what went on. "What are you talking about, Jake?" Meg was not about to admit anything that could give her boss an edge. "Oh, come on, Meg. Don't try and deny that you thought that plain old barn cat was some kind of rabid animal trying to attack you. The whole town knows about it, so you might as well admit it." So, Brady did betray her. Frustration started rising up within Meg. She was torn between sinking into an embarrassed silence and bolting out of the office. Yet her voice offered another option. Don't follow your old pattern of running and hiding just because you are angry and hurt. Stand up for yourself. Set the boundaries by which you are willing to be treated. Meg struggled with how to best handle the situation, but she knew that she could not just sit there with Jake Kelly laughing at her. "Well, I am so glad that Brady Callahan had fun spreading that story around town. And I hope that you have all enjoyed a good laugh over what seemed like a real emergency to me on my farm." While her words hung between them, Meg focused on her computer, feigning complete disinterest in how Jake Kelly might respond. Yet every fiber of Meg's body felt like a radar system monitoring Jake and his reactions. Would he lash out against her? Would he take action to quiet her? "Brady Callahan? What are you talking about, Meg? Brady had nothing to do with your story getting around town. The dispatcher put it out to Brady on the police frequency radio. Every police and fire department member hears that, as well as the rescue squad and any of the town busybodies that have scanners running in their houses. Meg could not believe what she was hearing. Her panicked 911 call had been reported over a public radio system. Oh, this time her action came swiftly, without thought or consideration. Jake, are you saying that the dispatcher announced my call publicly? Yep, and let me tell you, that news spread like wildfire. Hell, I heard about it when I stopped at the Legion for a beer yesterday afternoon. Meg could feel a tingling in her feet that signaled a red spread was well on its way. On top of everything going on at the farm and the voices she was hearing, both in her mind and in her dreams, and the fact that she was now the laughing stock of the town, there was no way Meg was going to allow Jake to witness a red spread. She needed to get out of that office if she was going to maintain any slice of self-confidence or pride. Jake, I'm going home. I really don't feel well. I haven't slept soundly in several nights. And while all of Eden may be amused at my inexperience with farm life, I don't need to sit here and have you throw it in my face. Before Jake could object, Meg was up, out of the office, and on her way home. During the short drive, she did her best to rationalize the town's behavior. But in all honesty, she could not. Here she was, a brand new member of the rural community, barely around long enough to have met more than a handful of people. Yet she was being turned into a town joke for no other reason than she misjudged a wild barn cat protecting her litter. By the time she pulled in the driveway, Meg was in a full-blown red spread, and her head was pounding. Walking into the house, Goldie immediately came to her side, greeting her owner with a caring welcome. Oh, Goldie, I don't know what's happening, but things aren't going so great in our world right now. Without pause, the girls moved in tandem to the summer warmth of the wraparound porch. Meg settled on the wicker swing, suspended from the beadboard ceiling in the far corner of the spacious veranda. Goldie tucked herself neatly underneath. Meg took comfort in snuggling into the lightweight cotton blanket that she'd pulled off the back of the swing. While the day was warm, the gentle softness of the coverlet felt like a comforting hug, which was just what Meg needed at the moment. The turn of her morning made Meg feel as if she were back in school, ostracized by the cool kids who always made fun of her. She had experienced a rough life growing up. Her parents, Elizabeth and Michael Flynn, met and married young and divorced shortly after she was born. Even before the ink dried on the divorce papers, Meg's father was gone, leaving her high school educated mother to struggle through a life of low wages and short-lived jobs. The end result was that Elizabeth and Meg moved often, continually packing and relocating their few possessions in hopes that the next town would become home. Home. It was a word that Meg idealized, as she really had no sense of the meaning. It wasn't that Elizabeth failed at making sure that her daughter had a decent place to live and good food to eat. It was more that Meg had been left alone and to her own devices for as long as she could remember. There was no choice. Her mother was always working to make ends meet, and there was never any other family around to help. Meg often wondered about her family, especially at school events, when she would witness a stream of grandparents, aunts, and uncles and cousins showing up for other kids. Yet try as she would, Meg could never get her mother to share memories or stories about her family. Whenever she brought up the subject, Elizabeth would simply say that she didn't want to talk about it. Once, on Christmas Eve, Meg pressed her mother for details. Upon finishing off her traditional brandy-laced eggnog, Elizabeth sentimentally reviewed a few snippets of family history in almost sacred-like whispers. My grandmother died before I was born, so I never knew her. My mother always told the story that my grandmother was widowed at a young age and had to work any job to make enough money to support the two of them. Guess that kind of tough luck runs in our family, huh? Anyway, one day my grandmother decided that she wanted to move away from her family, pretty much cut all ties to them. My mother never told me why. She just said that my grandmother packed up all their belongings and moved to New Jersey. As her mother spoke, 1,000,001 questions popped into Meg's mind, but she was afraid that if she interrupted, her mother's storytelling would come to an abrupt end. So Meg sat quietly, committing every detail to heart. The really sad part is that my grandmother ended up dying several years after she and my mother moved. My mother was just 18 at the time and in her last year of high school. Without family, my mother had no choice but to drop out of school and get a job. She went to work as a housekeeper for a wealthy New York City stockbroker and his wife. Eventually, she became the nanny for their 5 children. It was there she met my father, who was working as the family's mechanic and chauffeur. Within a year, they married and continued on with their jobs. 2 years later, I was born, and shortly after that, our family moved to Atlantic City for a business opportunity for my father. At that point, Elizabeth's voice broke, and she began to weep uncontrollably. Meg was unsure if it was the brandy or some untold family history causing her mother's melancholy. Either way, she sensed that the family storytelling had come to an end. Years later, after Elizabeth's passing, Meg went rummaging through a chest of her mother's keepsakes. There she discovered a personal journal authored by her mother during her teenage years. Meg sat cross-legged for hours, reading through Elizabeth's youthful reflections and dreams. The faded blue handwriting, inscribed upon yellowed pages, revealed a wealth of unknown details about her family. Included were 2 entries Meg imagined as the cause of her mother's tears that long ago Christmas Eve. In the first, Elizabeth detailed her mother's death from breast cancer and the deep depression suffered by her father after his wife's passing. The next entry was written a year later, to the day of her mother's death. It described Elizabeth's emotional devastation in finding her father lifeless in his bed, an empty bottle of pills seized within his hand. For months, Meg returned to her mother's journal to read and reread the stories about her family that she never knew. Yet of all she learned, the most meaningful discovery related to Elizabeth's mother, Meg's grandmother. According to the journal, her mother's mother was connected to Meg not only by blood and heritage, but by name, by their shared name of Margaret Rose. Sorry, I'm trying to turn a page here and it doesn't want to turn. Okay. I observed Mary filtering through Meg's dreams as she had planned, sharing images of the earthly life she had lived within me. There were moments of happiness as well as sorrow, all intended to deeply impress Mary within Meg's mind. It wasn't difficult for Mary to accomplish this task. All spirits have the ability to filter through a human's subconscious. The impact of such spiritual interaction, however, depends on each person and their willingness to accept the dreams as more than mindless fantasies. From all appearances, Meg was willing. However, as Mary advanced herself from Meg's dreams into her daydreams, I watched the stalwart woman begin to struggle. Meg was clearly disturbed by the imaginings that Mary was bringing into her mind, especially as the thoughts began to consume her days and nights. Yet I understood that Mary's intent was not to haunt Meg, rather to fully reach into her being and connect with her. It was a difficult situation, and I was caught between my compassion for both women, wondering how I might best aid them. I decided to first approach Mary. Mary, can you come near? I would like to speak of something of importance, something of concern to both of us. I am always close by, my friend. What is it that you would discuss? I have been observing the ways in which you are reaching out to Meg, and I believe that she has become most fully aware of you. I wondered if you feel the same. I do think that she feels my presence, although I am not sure she is quite ready for my spirit. Thus, I continue to permeate her dreams and occupy her mind. Understanding Mary's intense longing to pass, I proceeded carefully into my next thoughts. I know that you are doing all that you believe is necessary, but I wonder if Meg is someone more aligned with the spiritual side of her nature than most. I wonder if her knowledge of you is already sufficient, and by continuing to engage her, you may be depleting her more than preparing her. Mary's reaction to my question was swift and direct. How can you say such a thing, House? You know how hard it is for people to accept and engage spiritually. You above most understand how such interaction often requires numerous appearances and almost undeniable proof of existence. I have been but a few weeks proving my being to Meg, and if I should shorten this process and directly connect with her too early, and it does not go well, all will be lost. There is no going back to try and rebuild that bond. You and I both know that from our many years of trying to connect with other souls. Mary's words held truth. I also knew that they were exceptions to every circumstance. From all that I was observing with Meg, she was reaching a breaking point that might push her beyond her abilities as well as Mary's needs. Sweet Mary, please try and hear my words. Understand my intent. I am not finding fault. It is just that as I observe all you are undertaking in connecting with Meg, I believe she is ready. I also believe that you should push your connection with her soul. Should you push your connection with her soul much further, you may lose her and your chance to journey into the light. I finished my thoughts by radiating a strong feeling of love throughout my being. It was my hope that such tenderness would soften the way in which Mary received my words. The silence that followed indicated that my hope was flawed. Mary was not accepting my thoughts. To be honest, I could not fault her. In our time together, there were few who came to us with the clear ability to help her spirit. And while there remained the possibility that someone of such power might come again, it had been 150 years of failed tries. Mary was well entitled to her silence and to her plan. So, Margaret Rose, for those of you who like to connect the dots and have been paying attention from the beginning, Margaret Rose is a name that matters, and you will find out more as we go along. I just hope that you're enjoying this journey and you are finding interest in the spiritual side. As I've told you before, I did work with a medium on this book, and so much of what I've written about spirituality and the way that if you believe in this type of thing, that spirits try to connect with us, is based on the things that I learned in working with this medium. And as I've promised before, when we finish reading this book at the end of April, we will do a talk back on May 1st with the medium who helped me. And I think you'll enjoy that as well. So we only have 9 days left. This is getting very sad. We'll have to hang in. There's many more adventures to come and lots more between Mary and Meg. And I can't wait to share it with you. So thank you for joining with me tonight. I hope you all have a good night. I hope that hump day gets us to the hump, the other side of the hump, because this has been a big hump week for me so far. So I look forward to Thursday and Friday. And mostly I look forward to tomorrow night at 7:30 and sharing the Crown Hill journey with you again. Thank you for joining me. Have a good evening.